Hey guys, how are you today? I am super excited about the guest I'm about to have. This guy is a badass. His name is Dean Hall. And I just like, he's in a group that I'm in Arate, but I stumbled across one of his posts and I was like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? And he is a force to be reckoned with. I think we're going to learn so much today. Here is basically a formal bio of him, but I think getting to know him as a man is really going to change us all. Dean Hall is a seasoned veteran in the coaching field with over 30 years and 50,000 hours of face-to-face experience working with people. He's a two-time cancer survivor, world record setting extreme endurance athlete, and no stranger to personal hardship. Dean has the life experience to stand behind his techniques and advice. He firmly believes that reconnecting ourselves to nature has the power to change our lives for the better. He's discovered this firsthand when, while swimming the entire length of the Willamette River, nature healed his leukemia, and he was surprised to find he was in a state of radical remission, which we'll have to find out exactly what that is. I believe that lake is 187 miles. Now his mission in life is to lead and inspire others to discover the healing powers of nature for themselves. Are you ready to reclaim your life and reconnect with your wild self? He's written a book called, I believe it's called The Wild Life. I think I'm saying it wrong. Oh my goodness. When Dean Hall was losing his battle with cancer, he decided to go all in on one last dream in the hopes that his dying days would be memorable instead of heartbreaking. That dream became the first situation that changed his whole life. He wanted to become the first person in history to swim the entire length of the Willamette River in Oregon. That was his dream. And what happened over that course of 187 miles changed his life and healed his life. He is an incredible inspiration. If you see him on Instagram or anywhere on social media, you just see him out experiencing nature, and I am really so interested in learning from him and hearing from him, because as a practitioner as well as a therapist, which he is also a therapist, being able to find unique to us, I can't say unique to God, but ways in which that we can transform lives instead of the traditional ways. I'm always about that. This man is on the cutting edge of really life healing, and I'm so looking forward to hearing him. And I hope that you'll really listen in and apply this to just all areas of your life. I think we're all being called back to natural things and to the way that this universe, the way God has created it, and the healing properties that are available to us, that we have been ignoring and have silenced. The whispers of God, universe, source, the divinity has silenced that healing instruction that we could have, but it's been drowned out by what society tells us. So just, I love for you guys to hear what he has to say. I'm sure you will be transformed by the end. Hey guys, how are you today? As I mentioned, I have an incredible man on today that is really going to change your life. And I want you to just consider, as he's sharing his transformation and who he is and how he's healed, I would love it if you would apply it to yourself, and how this wise man can really literally change your whole life. So I'm just so grateful to have you here, Dean.
Oh, well,
Um,
thanks, Allison. I'm happy to be here.
you're just like incredible. As I mentioned before, prior to the beginning of our show, is that we're an Arate together, a group. So we loosely just kind of see one another. But I was so captured by your story, and I know that everyone here will be, because of the hope that it extends to us all. So would you be able to share with us, your story, how you got here from where you were?
Okay,
Love to hear
sure.
that.
Yeah, I'll do it as briefly as I possibly can, because there's 63 years worth, and so it's gonna. I'll be, feel free afterwards to expand or ask about different parts of it. But Basically, I was born and raised here in Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest in the 60s and 70s. I tell everybody before there were outdoor athletes or adventure athletes, there were Oregonians, because all of my friends, we all spent our summers and time kayaking, canoeing, hiking, climbing. It's just, I mean, when you live only an hour from the mountains and then an hour from the beach, and within an hour of 20 different rivers. It's kind of an outdoor enthusiast playground. And it really was for me, Allison, because both my parents back in the 60s were mountain climbers. It's what they were passionate about. And this was back when women didn't do that kind of thing. But my little Swedish mom, man, she was right in there with the guys and tougher than any of them. And so I feel like I had just an almost idyllic childhood, because, I'd come back to school after a weekend and all the kids would have been bored all weekend, complaining about all they had to do was watch a Scooby-Doo marathon. And then they'd ask me, what did you do? Oh, well, I climbed Oregon's tallest mountain. And so I got to do that. But the other reason I feel like it was just a sweet childhood is in the 60s, I had the only parents I knew that really liked each other or loved each other. They would just, dad would chase mom around all the time, and we thought it was gross at the time. But secretly we loved it. And then the other thing, being mountain climbers, they wanted to stay fit, stay in shape. So I had the only parents I knew of that had a gym in the basement, and they'd work out with these old cast iron weights. And I mean, it was primitive, but I had two parents that stayed fit constantly and really provided a fantastic role model for me there of what it meant to be alive, in love, happy, and adventuring. They showed me what I felt was a very healthy form of adulthood. I couldn't wait to become an adult. And so that was my childhood. And then I became what I thought was really good at soccer. I saw a guy wearing a t-shirt the other day that says, the older I get, the better I was. And that kind of
That's
that
good.
kind of sums up my soccer career. But I was on the very first Nike sponsored team, youth team, that was a youth development team, and they took me over to England, and we thought we were great until we played under the reserves for Manchester United and Liverpool and some of those teams. And their reserves were doing things we'd never seen. And so we came back really humble, but it was fun. And I had a lot of different places to go play soccer. And on a lark, I picked a small college in Kansas, thinking it would just be fun. I'd never heard of anybody that had been to Kansas. I'd been one of my majors was American history and Civil War, and Kansas had such a big part of that. So I thought, man, I'll go there, have fun, get my education paid for, and learn a lot about history. And went there, had a lot of fun, and fell in love with a cute little Kansas farm girl and put myself in exile for love. She's like, hey, I'm not going back there. You came here. If you love me, you'll stay here. I'm like, well, let me think about it. Okay. And so that's what I did. And we built a really nice life together in her small, tiny little rural town of 13,000. And I taught there for 20 years. And about 10 years into it, I realized that I was feeling called to something more. And so I went back to school and got my degree in family therapy. And so for 13 years, I taught and did therapy while I built my private practice. And did a lot of wonderful, fun things with that. I became a fairly well-known weekly advice columnist in several small town newspapers around the Midwest and the country, and did that for about 10 years on the side. Did a lot of keynote speaking, wrote a book. It was starting to do really well on teaching girls how to protect themselves from date rape.
What's the name of that book?
And
It's,
it's called A Girl's Guide to Psychos, Players, Punks, and Pervs.
I
How to
love
become the
that.
yeah, how to become the ultimate guy detector. And it was doing really well. And I was starting to get known. I was starting to work with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and different organizations, going to colleges and speaking. Because what I did is something no one had done. I took I found out the FBI had 4 very accurate profiles for acquaintance rapists. You couldn't find them anywhere in the literature, and no girls knew about them. And I thought, man, girls need to know this. But
Yes.
of course, they're not going to read, these kind of profiles. It's so boring. So I worked with a group of I worked with the whole community college for a year, interviewing, finding out what their dating practices were. It was absolutely terrifying at that time, what I found they were.
Wow.
They would hang out. This was early 2000s. And they've gotten away from this, but at that time, for about 10, 15 years, what they do is they go hang out and then hook up.
Yeah.
And so it's just random guys that they never knew. They didn't know if they were safe or not. Yeah, there was.
Wow.
I think women were heavily sexually traumatized during that time, especially young women.
I
And so
think
I
they
was
still
working.
are too. I think they,
Oh yeah, yeah. The
yeah.
dating practices have changed a bit, and it's not quite as random, but there's still real problems there. But it was just starting to build, and then it looked like all our hard work and all the dues that we had paid were really paying off. Everything was going quite swimmingly. And then my wife got a brain tumor, and 52 days later, she was dead.
Oh my God.
And it was devastating. I had been considered a grief expert in the Midwest. And when I felt what grief really feels like, I was so uh broken that I even looked up 2 of my old clients and wrote them a letter of apology. I said, I did my best, but I obviously didn't know anything about grief. And both of them were real gracious and said, Dean, you were helpful. It's okay. But I just realized how much I didn't know. And the other thing I hadn't realized is I'd gotten married so young and moved to this tiny little town where, unless your grandparents grow up there, you're an outsider. And me coming from the West Coast, it meant I was a hippie. And so I'm a hippie and an outsider. And after about 5 years, everybody kind of got to know me, and most of them liked me, but I was still Mary's husband.
Wow.
Hey, there's Mary's husband. And 30 years later, even after having taught there and been a therapist there, I'm still Mary's husband. That's what everybody called me.
Yeah.
And then when she died, they'd still call me that. And I'd be like, well, I wish I was. I'm not.
Right.
And I just knew that I couldn't stay there. So I moved back home, gave up my private practice, gave up my work on the book because it was just too hard of a subject. And that's when I really spiraled. I found myself in this land that I love again, but unknowingly giving up all my adult friends because I moved here, giving up my support network, giving up my career, and I literally then had nothing and was renting for the first time in 30 years.
Yes.
And so it just felt like I'd lost everything. And 2000 by 2013, I was diagnosed with leukemia and lymphoma, and I believe a large part due to the grief and the torment, the suffering of that grief, and how I was not allowing myself to express it or deal with it really. And so That was 2011, about a year after my first wife died. And then by 2013, I was down to 158 pounds. And I'm 6'1.5", and I usually run right around 200 to 215. Even now, well, like right now, I'm like 212 and don't have much body fat. So I'm just not a huge guy, but 150, I looked like I was coming out of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing on me were my lymph nodes had swollen up so I could hardly turn my neck. And then I had what my oncologist lovingly called my hockey puck under my right arm. It was the size and shape of a hockey puck. And then about 60 other lymph nodes around my body that had gone crazy. And I just was so tired and so depressed and so grief stricken and so tormented that one day I'd made a practice of never looking at myself in the mirror, because I felt like I looked disfigured. I didn't really recognize myself anymore. And I accidentally caught myself glancing at myself in the mirror, and it just broke my heart what I saw. I mean, you could see my clavicle and all my ribs and my pelvis. I was gaunt. But the thing that broke me is looking into my eyes. That guy just looks so sad. I just never seen me look like that before. And I thought, if I let the leukemia take me, nobody'd ever know. And I've had a good life. I've kind of experienced and had wonderful successes and accomplished everything I wanted to. So I'm good. I'm done. But my daughter was 21 at the time, and she's just adorable. And I love her more than life itself. And I thought, this is a selfish thought that I do not have the luxury to nurse or to water. I've got to pull this weed. And having been a therapist for so long, I had many people come back from terrible trauma or persistent depression or anxiety using Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and his emphasis that if you're passionate about a purpose, if I could just help them find a purpose and get passionate about it, they would get better. So I knew that if I was going to stay alive, I had to become passionate about something. But what? I didn't feel fit enough to do therapy. It's bad if you're sitting and listening to somebody and wanting to say, that's all you got? Listen to my story. That's not a good place to
Not
come
gonna
from.
work.
No, probably not. And so I knew that wasn't really realistic. I'd written a book. And for me, that was hard work. I knew I didn't have the bandwidth for that. And so I just started several times a day. I don't know if you use this. I'm sure you probably do. I use this all the time, both in my life and then with my clients. The brain, by its very nature, has to answer every question you ask. It cannot not answer a question. And a lot of people know that's true with trivia, but they don't know that you can do that with the most important things in your life. And so I started asking myself, what should I passionately give myself to? What would be my purpose now? And I even started asking it very prayerfully and then just meditating, because I made a commitment October of 2000 to meditate an hour every day. And so I'd been doing that for about 13 years by this time. And so I split it up into 3 times a day because I didn't have much to do. And I would pray and meditate, asking God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, my heart, what's my purpose now? And it was crickets. I expected to get an answer in a day or two. And at week 3, I thought, well, you know what? While I'm waiting for the universe to answer me, maybe I should just clean up this place. Because I'd been living there for about 6 months, and I'd been so depressed.
Maybe was he saying to clean up your apartment? Was that it? Like,
Yeah, I think that was
in
it.
order, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I at least unpack and do a little decorating, something. So I unpacked the box,
Exactly.
and my mom had thrown some of my childhood things in a box, and I unpacked it. There was a journal I was forced to keep in sixth grade when I was 11. And if you didn't know me at 11, I was so ADD. Unless I had been forced, there's no way I would have kept a journal. But I opened it up and it said, when I get old, I gotta climb Mount Everest, swim the English Channel. And when I saw that, it was just, I'm getting goosebumps now. It's just like this electric shock went through me. My heart just leapt. And I was like, hell yeah. And I'm like, how did I forget that guy? Because when I was a kid, anybody asked me what I was going to do for a living before soccer took over my life, my constant answer from the time I was 6 or 7 to the time I was about 17 was, I'm going to be a sponsored adventurer. I'm going to be a mountain climber, probably. Because I just love that. And I, through my mom and dad's circles, met some of those guys, and the way they lived, it just seemed so cool. And so I thought I'd gotten responsible and forgotten about this, what I really wanted in life. And so very quickly I did the math. Okay, my immune system's so bad, I know it won't handle elevation, much less a meal in Kathmandu. So, but I can swim the channel. And I don't know why I thought I could, but I Googled that night uh, to find out if any active cancer patient had ever swum the channel. They hadn't. So I thought, okay, I could be the first person in history to do something. And being a history major, that meant something to me. I mean, like, I thought, how many times am I going to get a chance to do something that no one in history has ever done? And I just got so excited that I knew that's what I had to do, even though it made no sense whatsoever. Yeah.
You're gonna stop there. I feel like I'm like so excited right now.
Oh, good,
I mean,
good.
but I have like questions as you're going, but I,
Yeah,
because, okay, I might as well, since you took a breath.
sure. Yeah,
All right. So there's a few things. One is that the meditation
right.
and the persistent seeking to
Sure.
find the answer, and that when you're saying asking those wise questions, whenever I have had like dark times,
Hmm.
I will say, maybe it's from, like therapists are like expert question askers.
Right, right, right.
It's like asking
If they're
yourself.
good.
Exactly.
I,
Well,
I've known some that aren't,
you
but
have no idea. Yes, me too,
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately. Yes. So, but that question, I asked that question once, and you would think after you've had success or whatever, written a book, and you have
right,
counseling,
right.
oh, like I know my purpose. No, it's like that thing inside, that spark, right? And I asked the question, and you know what the answer came to me is that your only purpose is first to know your lovability, and then
Oh, I
to
love that.
share. Isn't that incredible? And then to share, help others to know their lovability. That's all. That's it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's sure been nice talking to you, Allison. Um, I think our work is done here.
Our work is done here. But so you made that decision to
Right,
swim the channel.
right.
So, and also there's a lot here there's a lot.
Yeah.
So the grief and it's almost like you mentioned that you feel like the leukemia came from the grief, and I'm curious, could you just speak on that for just a moment?
Yeah, I think I've come to believe, and I think research kind of nods to this. I think there are some people that are just poison, like my first wife was, Mary. We used to laugh because one of her funniest stories was standing out in the wheat field and holding her dad, and her uncle would make her stand out, and her cousins out in the wheat field and hold the flag for the crop dusters while they'd spray DDT right over them. and they'd come in and they get in trouble if their moms wouldn't shower them down. But a lot of times they'd run off and play afterwards. And she's like, oh, I'd sweat off.
Wow. Wow.
And this little town of 13,000, when I left, she was the 11th person in 5 years to die of a brain tumor. At that point, there were 15 people in the town that had Parkinson's. And then there were several. I had been diagnosed the first time with leukemia in 2007. There were a lot of blood cancers. This area, I think the water table had gotten so filled with pesticides, and then just the constant spraying in the air, and not a lot of trees, so it's not getting clean. The air's not getting clean. And most of these people that were dying of the brain tumors and did have Parkinson's, like Mary, were little farm kids in the 50s and 60s getting DDT sprayed on them. And so I think there's a whole group of folks that are just poison. But then I think, and I'd say that's probably, and this is just Dean Hall's crazy thoughts, watching people. There's no research behind this. I'm sure there is. I just haven't read it, but this is my theory. That's about 30, maybe 40%. The rest of us, and the most of us, are just so either traumatized or repressed in the way we don't express our emotions, that we don't have a healthy flow going. The latest in emotional theory, they came out with this with the work on neuroplasticity in the early 2000s. By 2007, they were essentially saying that the emotional system works just like the digestive system. You chew up life's experiences, be they good or bad. That's exactly what your body, mind, and spirit needs. But then it also releases. But the way the mind is hardwired to release is crying, screaming, and hitting things. Well, we're taught not to do those things very early in life. So we clamp down and we try to make our emotions mean something that they don't. And by doing that, we stop the flow and we become sick. Yeah.
Really, I appreciate that. One of the things, and I just would say this, I had no research at all to back it up. I just believed it. I would tell people and myself that, it's like having an emotion. It's kind of like blowing your nose or going to the bathroom. Like you resist it. And it's exactly what you're saying. So it's cool because it's something that I just felt, that it doesn't have to be so frightening, and like moving through it is incredible. But I think that then there's that path that people take where they get stuck in that one long emotional response where then they're a victim, like I'm afraid to feel it. If I feel it, because we believe if we feel it, feels so much more primitive, we're going to never not feel it, right? So,
and I tell people that's as crazy as worrying you're going to pee for the rest of your life.
That's such a good example. I'm using that.
The body knows when to release.
Yes.
And it knows when it's done. And because our emotions in our society, we've separated ourselves from our emotions so much, we don't understand. And so we try to give it meaning that it doesn't have. When we have to go to the bathroom, we don't give it meaning because we've been potty trained.
Yes.
We just need to emotionally potty train ourselves. Notice when we're feeling, know how to let it release in a way that works for us personally, do it in private, then clean ourselves up and get back to living and don't even think about it anymore.
I love that. That's so good.
And it makes sense to most people. I've been telling people that since about 2008 or 9, and I've never had anyone argue with it. Everybody intuitively knows, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Wish I would have known that 30 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like so you were taught to repress all of that. It's interesting, after my husband died, we had 6 dogs.
Wow.
We did. And very, very soon after he died, 2 of them died. Really, literally, broken heart. they
Yeah.
got sick and died.
Yeah.
Like, and it's the same kind of a, you know, thought. So
Sure.
when you got up to this now, and I'm hearing it, you have total despair up till
Totally.
you find that spark. Now you have this light,
Right.
right?
Right.
So now when you're
And
gonna,
it wasn't a constant light. It sometimes, when I told my oncologist, he not only said no, he said, hell no. He's like, Dean, you get in a public pool, your immune system's so bad, just getting in the pool could kill you. I'm
wow,
like, well, what do you want me to do? I'm dying anyway. I'm not going to die on a couch watching Wheel of Fortune.
right,
I
yeah,
want to die. If I do this thing, even if I die, it leaves my daughter with a legacy of courage that I was doing something,
yes,
and swinging for the fence, not just sitting there, getting smaller and sicker.
love that.
So
I
yeah.
love that.
And I told my parents, these wild adventuring parents, and I thought they'd cheer me on because they had most of my crazy ideas through life. And my mom cried. I was like, what? She's like, oh, wait till you're in remission or doing better. This is not the time. And all my friends thought I was crazy. So I just got to the point where I didn't tell anyone, but I just did what I needed to do every day. And I found with big dreams, that's fairly common. I call it the desert of big dreams. After the initial fanfare and excitement, life's going to test you to see if you're serious. And if you don't give up, then all of a sudden life starts handing you little gifts. And that's what it did to me too.
Yeah,
Um,
such a
by
great
I
metaphor. Yeah,
Yeah, I started swimming August of 2015, and that first day I could only do 11 laps. And it took me over an hour. 11 laps now takes me maybe like 9 minutes. But it felt good. It felt like me again because I'd been a triathlete for years and years and years back in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. And so lap swimming was like home for me. And so kicking off that wall is like, oh, I remember you. And so every day I'd try to do one more lap. And, pretty soon I was getting fit. I was gaining weight. My numbers were going in the right direction, and according to blood tests, because of all the movement, my lymph nodes were going down just a little bit,
love that.
and my head was clearing. And one day I got out right around Christmas. I got out of the pool, and it hit me. Who cares if another middle-aged man puts on a Speedo and swims to France? It's not going to do the world any good. And in my case, it won't be a pretty picture. And so I started going back to that prayerful questioning again. How could I do this, but make it bigger and better? And very quickly, a thought came to me. Well, don't make it about you. Try to inspire other cancer patients. Well, that felt good because I didn't want it to be about me. I don't care if it's about me. That seems a bit incongruent with who I've always been. And then secondly, uh, I thought, why go to England? Everybody and their dog has swum the channel. Nobody's ever swum the entire length of what I've always called Mama River, because the Willamette is Oregon's longest river. It's 187 miles long. It starts up in the mountains. It's largely a snowmelt river, so it's cold. And then it comes through our two big college cities. Then it comes through our capital city. Then it comes through the Willamette Valley, where all the wineries and the rich farmland are. Then it comes through Portland, which is our largest city. I was born only 4 blocks from it. And then it goes into the Columbia. And so I thought, this is so much more me, and it's local. And so I partnered with the local Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to do this thing. And then that's what I did. It took me 22 days. I started June 3rd and then June 27th. And we took every Sunday off. Um, uh, I was able to swim the entire river.
Can you
The hardest, Go ahead.
I just want to understand the logistics. So
Yeah.
let's say it took 22 days. Now I'm picturing that you swam 187 miles without without stopping.
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody could. I don't think so. Because at
And
some
it
point you
seems
got to sleep.
impossible,
I
but what
was
did you
doing,
do?
to put it into context, um, an Ironman in an Ironman triathlon, a marathon swimming event is 3.3 miles. And I was averaging with leukemia and lymphoma 10 to 12 miles a day. So 3 to 5 marathons a day in 40-degree water. Yeah. And that was the hardest part. It was so cold that even with the 3 mil triathlon wetsuit, I would swim for about 45 minutes, have to get, as if that wasn't exhausting enough, have to get out onto the riverbank and run in place or do jumping jacks because I'd be going into thrombosis, or what
Wow.
they call deep core throttle, when your internal organs, you've gone so far into hypothermia that your internal organs are banging against your rib cage. You better get out when that starts
Yeah.
happening. And so we'd use that as the alarm, and I'd get out, warm up for about 10 or 15 minutes, get back in, do it all, and kind of piggyback my way
Wow.
through 10 or 12 miles.
I
Yeah.
love it. So like
Yeah.
what you described, like what did that do? Because I think anybody who watches you knows what it did. But
Yeah.
tell us what you think about that healed you.
It did a lot. There's something called the blue mind. I'd never heard of this either. It's kind of become the treatment of choice for trauma, especially with combat veterans. They found that the human mind is sinks. It just somehow reacts to water. It's just a part of being human. It doesn't matter age, gender, race, culture. None of that matters. They found that if you get in, on, by, around, or underwater, within 2 minutes, the brain goes into a rest state. You do that enough, and it starts healing the trauma. It gives you enough space from those trauma triggers. Well, here I am moving and feeling the current of this river all day, every day, and fluid motion, moving forward, making progress. And then also, I don't know how much you've read about this earthing movement, but the magnetic resonance, you know, I'm getting that in spades because water superconducts electricity. And so I'm getting grounded constantly as well. But I didn't know anything about Wim Hof or hypothermia or cold water immersion and how that boosts the immune system. What a lot of people don't know too, I call it poor man's shock therapy. Uh, it, when you get shocked by cold water, your brain has a neurological knee-jerk reaction. It floods your brain with serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, noradrenaline, and even oxytocin, the chemical you only usually get after an orgasm. So I was feeling really good most of the day. Plus, I was getting that earth core magnetic resonance or vibration. Plus, it was taking down all the inflammation. Plus, that kind of extreme movement was moving my lymph system and super oxygenating my body. Makes it all sound really fun, but when I speak to people, because they're like, "Oh, wasn't that fun?" And I'm like, well, think about a place that takes you 3.5 or 4 hours to drive to. Got it? Yeah. Think about how boring that drive can be. Got it? Yeah. Okay. Now think about if you bicycled the whole way. What would that be like? Okay. Now think about it if you ran the whole way. Think about what that would be like. Now think about if you crawled the whole way with somebody holding a cold garden hose spraying you in the face the entire time.
Yeah.
That's kind of more what it was like.
Yeah.
It was really, really difficult.
Yes.
But I was embracing that challenge to let my actions speak louder than my words to other cancer patients.
Wow.
And so I had this purpose. I didn't know what it was doing to my body or to my mind. I
Yeah.
had no idea.
What did you want to tell the cancer patients? Like, what was the message?
Yeah, that you don't have to be defined by a diagnosis.
Yes. Yeah.
That just because you've gotten a diagnosis doesn't change who you are. And then the second real important message, and probably the more important of the two, is the best way to fight cancer is not to fight anything at all. The
Love it.
best way to fight cancer is to love life. Yeah,
I tell everyone, like, whatever we fight against owns us. Like,
yeah,
that is like, or struggle against.
exactly. Yeah,
I'm really, really, I'm like I'm so taken by everything that you're saying, because I don't think that there's ever coincidences. And whenever somebody like comes on this show, like, it always is just lines up with something maybe I was thinking about or whatever. And I've been like drawn over and over again to, like, I want a river in my backyard, over and over again.
there you go.
It's so
Yeah,
weird, you know? And then,
yeah.
so I just would love for you to be able to talk about, I have so many questions, for you to be able
Sure.
to talk about, how did you find out that you were healed? This completely healed your cancer, correct?
Yeah, my leukemia
Okay.
didn't heal my lymphoma.
Okay.
But yeah, the first blood test, I knew I was feeling good. And I knew I was looking better and feeling stronger. And I mean, if you can swim 3 marathons a day for 22 days, you're probably doing okay.
Yes.
And I felt like I was, but then when I took the blood test, the doctor came in and he's like, well, I don't know how to tell you this. Well, anytime I'd had an oncologist tell me that, it was bad news.
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh, geez, here we go. I'm like, well, just spit it out. He's like, what? I said, well, just spit it out. He's like, oh, no, Dean, sorry. He's like, I can't find your leukemia at all. He said, as a matter of fact, if I hadn't diagnosed you myself, I would have thought you'd been misdiagnosed. He's like, there's no trace of it. And the type that I had, the Western medicine common belief is that CLL, you'll always have it. You just have to manage it. You never get rid of it. And someday it'll kill you. But he's like, there's no trace of it there whatsoever. And he was considered at the time in the world's top 5 leukemia researchers and oncologists. I'd fly down to University of San Diego to see him. His name was Dr. Juanerio Castro, just a brilliant, wonderful man. But he was thrilled. Yeah, but he was really concerned about my lymphoma and wanted me to do chemo because it was getting really aggressive. I was starting to swell up again. And wanted to do chemo and radiation right away. And I said, hey, is this life threatening? He's like, well, it's getting there, but not quite yet. I said, do I have 6 months? He says, I don't know. I says, well, I've been reading a lot in this field called ecopsychology, and there's something called forest bathing that the Japanese do, and there's something that comes out of the trees called phytoncides that boost your immune system, and the NK or natural killer cells, the cells that fight cancer, boost them over 200 times for a week if you only spend an hour in the forest. And I'd really like to try that for 6 months and see what happens. He's like, okay, well, at least you're not swimming another river. So, okay. He's like, you'll just have to get more routine blood counts. And if we get to this number, you got to stop your little experiment and do chemo. And I'm like, okay, I'll make that deal. And so I did. I started going out into the Mount Hood wilderness, learned about backpacking hammocks. And man, those are so comfortable. Only takes about a minute to throw up. And then you're just kind of rocking in the trees. It's so amazing. I'll never use a tent again unless I'm in the Arctic and there are no trees.
Wow.
But started doing that and spending all night long and many times grieving, having that grief come up from losing my first wife. And I felt like I could in private do that. And then walking out feeling amazing the next day. So I started that May of 2015. And by March of 2016, my lymphoma was gone. That was the only extra thing I added to the regimen. So I think that was, and so, and I wouldn't have probably had the courage to do that if the river hadn't healed me.
Wow.
But it showed me firsthand how powerful, once you hook into that power of nature, uh, you can heal just about anything. Not everything. I'm not saying everything, but just about anything with that, if you've got the time and if you know what to do. And the reason I started going out every week, Allison, is because if you do the math, if it boosts it for 2 weeks by 200%, I thought, well, if I went every week, not only for an hour, but around the clock, maybe it's 200%. And if I go out every week and it lasts for 2 weeks, it starts becoming exponential. That
Yeah,
was my reasoning.
it's great reasoning.
So, and it did.
It
Yeah.
really did. And I
Yeah.
think that what you've done is incredible and groundbreaking, probably. And I mean,
Was for me anyway.
it definitely is for you, but anyone who
Yeah.
listens,
Right.
it's incredible. It's just incredible. So what I just want to ask you about that, because there's a few elements that you describe, the
Sure.
healing, you know,
Right.
the grief part,
Right.
going in, because we were discussing this before we started, that, you know, me being called to like trees and nature, you know, grieving my husband, and you describing how you felt like that was helping you heal your
Right.
grief. Would just love to hear more about that, like what you think
Yeah.
that is.
Being raised in the 60s and 70s, I had that old silly male thing back there that big boys don't cry. And, as a therapist, I knew that's not true.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I wasn't that repressed, but I actually was. That ancient childhood training is hard to fight against during the tough times in life. And so getting out there all alone, and then I'd go about a half a mile off of the path. So I was way deep in parts of the forest that nobody ever goes to or sees. The part that I go to, I never see any evidence of other humans ever being there. I'm sure some throughout the last 100 years
Yeah.
may have wandered that way, but I never see anyone. And so I knew that I'd have the privacy I needed. But also, you've got to remember that trees are really built like antenna. The whole earth is one big battery with that molten core and the fact that it's spinning. Then you've got these antennae, or a whole field of antennae, and our cells are highly electrical. And then we're stepping into this electrical field, I think, that helps recalibrate and discharge any negative charge that we have in our body. And they now have been able to electrically measure each emotional state. And there is an electrical charge to each emotional state. And so I believe that when you get out in nature, nature works with the natural parts of your body to recalibrate it back toward health.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find that out more and more and more. And that's certainly what happened to me.
You know, it really, really makes me think. You seem like you're just kind of humble about that. You're just this one guy that did this thing, but you
Kind
know,
of am.
like but really, honestly, I'm gonna just. I mean, I feel pretty certain of it. It's like the 4 minute mile. You know, it's like incredible what you're doing, but you're saying like,
Oh, thanks.
and I do believe that. I think
Yeah.
that there's this call back to nature, I think, and it's coming in all different directions and people are
Right.
talking about it, but you actually went out there and lived this like, you know, like mental toughness, like pushing through on so many levels, emotionally, like to, as a man, to go out there and face that pain. That's
Right.
incredible, right?
Yeah. right.
So could you feel like the pain being like
Pulled
excavated?
out of you.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
feel it?
Yeah. I cried like a baby. I mean, sobbed big snot tears.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
it was ugly. And I don't know that I would have allowed myself to do that unless I'd have been private. I'd worked with a good therapist and kind of let a few tears drip, but not just allow my body to do what it needed to do. And our bodies are hardwired to know exactly what we need if we just get out of the way. And so by being so far out there and in a very healing, what I felt was supportive environment, because you got to remember, my happiest early childhood memories are deep up in the Cascades. Uh, and so I always kind of equate love and happy times with being out in nature.
yeah,
So I think it's what kind of made it an easier leap for me.
yes.
But when I was out there, I felt loved and supported by nature, and so I could allow my natural parts to just do whatever it needed to do to recalibrate and discharge so that I could return to health.
You
Because
know,
I knew I mean, everybody knows when they're holding on to too much because they got that 500 pounds on their chest.
yes, yes. And we're so conditioned not to notice it. There's so much
Right,
noise and
right,
everything happening that's keeping us from, and just and who wants to feel it really?
right.
What we were discussing, before this was I was sharing about, that after my husband died, I just could not do anything, but all the only comfort I found was outside with the flowers and the trees. And I was sharing with you, and it's embarrassing for me to say, but that I could feel the love. And
Right.
what you're saying, like supported. I felt like I mean, it sounds silly, but I felt like the trees were loving me, and they were
Yeah.
the more than any human being could support me were those streets. And I would walk like in suburban nature, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just to be with them. And I
Right.
felt like I loved them, like they were
Yeah.
my only friends, which I mean, that's what it felt like to me. I was like, oh, my only friends, but, and they're never going to tell anyone anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but the thing, like also that, and then remember we were discussing, I was saying how like I felt I would tell people that emotion is like blowing your nose or going to the
Right.
bathroom, like let it
Right.
move through you. And I'd love you to tell more because you were sharing that about emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe the emotional system. Well, really, this is the latest paradigm. But nobody hears it. This is just kind of my take on it. Because I geeked out on the science in 2007, but then I realized unless my clients geek out on the science, I can't explain this really cool thing to them. And then it hit me, oh, what the neurologists and neuropsychologists are saying is the emotional system works just like the digestive system. You chew up life's experiences, be they good or bad. That's exactly what your body, mind, and I believe your spirit needs in order to be healthy, growing, strong. But there are a lot of waste products. Those waste products are anger, sadness, fear, hurt, loneliness, guilt, and shame, the big seven. And because they're so intense, and because heretofore we've known so little about them, we try to give them meaning that they simply don't have or deserve. They're just psychological urine and feces.
Yes.
And our bodies, they cycle through our bodies, and our bodies will tell us when it's time to release them, just like our bladders do our urine and feces. But the way brain research has proven that the body is hardwired to release is crying, screaming, or hitting things. Well, you watch any 2-year-old, there are very few 2-year-olds that are not psychologically well adjusted. And the reason is they get upset. They'll do one, if not all three of those things. 5 minutes later, they're fine.
Yes.
Okay. We're taught not to and not shown how we can do so in a healthy way. And so we clamp down, and we clamp down hard. And we make, if we even feel anything, we either blame somebody for making us feel, or we blame ourselves for feeling, which is a part of our human experience. and we hold on and hold on and hold on until we can't hold on anymore, and then we release, usually in an inappropriate time, in an inappropriate way. And I call it emotionally wetting your pants. And it's so embarrassing that we then hold down even harder. And
Yes.
I believe that's what really causes a lot of addiction, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. Now, please don't hear me incorrectly. I'm not saying all of those, and I'm not saying
No
it's the
haters,
only thing
please.
that causes
No
it, but
comments on that if you don't like it.
yeah,
Exactly. Keep your mouth shut.
yeah. No, but what I am saying is that's a great, very fundamental paradigm to use when thinking about your emotions and your emotional state to stay healthy. And that's why one of the things that we didn't talk about that I'd like you to hear, because I think it's the coolest thing ever, that I started doing because of this, right before I go to bed every night, I do what I call zero out. Ever since I was a little kid, I'll go pee before I go to bed because I don't want to get up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Okay. Your brain, your subconscious never stops, even if you're asleep. And the latest in dream theory is we dream because our subconscious is trying to work out the most intense emotions we had that day or a few days previous. What I started doing is every night for about 10, 20 minutes before I go to bed, I will start to review my day. I call it my VHS tape meditation. I will imagine I'm putting in an old VHS tape, I hit play, my day starts, and I'm watching it, but I'm also watching my body. And if my body tightens up, I'll hit pause. I'll ask what's the emotion, what happened here, and then I will breathe out and let that emotion go. And I will rate it. Oh, wow, I'm feeling that up to about an 8. And I'll keep breathing and letting it go, and maybe forgive the people involved or forgive myself for being imperfect or whatever. But I'll just keep letting go until I'm down to a 0 or a 1. Then I'll hit play and I'll start watching my day again. I'll go all the way through my day. And then once I get to the end, I'll go through it quickly again to see if anything else is there. And then I go to sleep. And I go to sleep. I sleep better. I don't have as many nightmares, which I was just plagued with after my first wife died. And I wake up happy. And after about 2 months of that, I was standing in the grocery store. And one of the things, I've always loved kids, but one of the things I started noticing is I just became like a kid magnet. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I haven't felt this since I was a teacher. But I was standing in the grocery store, and there were about 30 or 40 of us standing in different lines. And these kids were trying to get my attention. So I was kind of dorking around with them. And then I realized, oh, I know why they're trying to get my attention. I'm the only adult here that is awake and in his body.
Wow. Yeah.
Everybody else is a walking zombie or sleepwalking through their life like I did for many years.
Wow.
Yeah, because we're carrying not only the day, the week, maybe decades of junk into every day, and then wondering why we're so tired and anxious and depressed and draggy and not very exuberant or happy about life anymore. Yeah.
I love what you just said.
Yeah, I knew you would.
I do. I freaking love that. That is so good. It
It's
is,
one of my most important practices, and it's one of the reasons I think I was able to, recover from leukemia and lymphoma without chemo or radiation.
and from the loss, right?
Yeah.
This, I do know that we have to go, but I just have to say
Sure.
two things.
Yeah.
I have so many things to say, but, and hear from you really. Okay. One of them, I'm like, all right. One of them is when you were describing being in the river and in the
Right.
water, right? I
Right.
had a woman, and she's my friend, Tracy Dews. She wrote the book Hydrate. I don't know if you ever
Oh,
read it. I would,
uh,
if you would,
I've
if,
heard of it. Yeah.
oh my God, it's just, she's incredible. But what she would describe, and I'm sure you know this because you're a brilliant man, but she would say I'm her water sister. So that we're made up of we have water bodies, and that we need to be like, and you're describing being near water, underwater, touching water, all of that, that is really what we are. And that it gets all distorted and misshapen, the water molecules, which, I mean,
Right.
you know
Right.
that, and more receptive to viruses and all this stuff. So I
Right.
just wanted to like touch that because I feel like you were in that water, like being a water baby. Like you were being
Yeah.
like a water, like that is like in tune, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned so much just by being in the water that much 24/7 practically. And one of them, and this, I'm like, how could I not figure this out? Why did it take till day 6? I was swimming along day 6, and I'm going around some rocks and some different ferns. And then we came to this one place that was pretty fast, and I had to zigzag through several rocks, and it hit me, water never fights anything.
Oh,
When
yeah.
it comes up to an obstacle, it doesn't waste any time. It doesn't get mad. It doesn't try to knock that rock or get that rock to see its point of view. It doesn't waste any energy. It just moves right around it, or over it, or under it. And if it's totally blocks it, it just keeps going until it can pour over it again. It never wastes any time.
I love that.
And all my life, I'd been, bashing my head against my goals or whatever. I was even fighting cancer.
Yep.
And that's not water.
No.
Water never fights anything, but it can break anything.
Yes.
So yeah,
You
it's one of
know,
the great.
the so overwhelmed because I'm dying. I have like 1,000 questions and I know we have to go, but
Oh, we'll have to do this again
I
sometime.
know I'm dying. I'm just like I'm like hyperventilating because it's so great and fascinating to me because I think that you will have a very big impact on this earth.
I
Like if
hope so.
I do because like if you look at like Gary Brecka, he's like doing groundbreaking stuff, and like you're another voice of that. But you're
Mhm.
actually like you like healed so many things. I would love to hear your wisdom on one more thing, and then
Sure.
we'll part ways. But this is the thing. I think that as parents, I always tell parents that very often we try to stop our children's feelings because of how we don't want to feel what we feel when we watch them feel. So, and I know that un maybe consciously and unconsciously, I've done that to my children through the grieving process because when it hurts so much,
Yeah.
to see them hurt is so hard to see. So it's like then, maybe subliminally or however I act,
Right.
it shuts them down, right?
Sure.
I'm just curious. I mean, I know that it's like really about me when I shut their feelings down. That's what
Oh
it's
yeah.
about. It's about the parent, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so it's really important for the parent to know first how to govern their own grief or their own emotions and get really comfortable with developing I call it the 4 R's: rating, removing, releasing, resolving. And if you get used to that process and you find what works for you, then you can teach your children how to do it. It's so much like potty training. It's not even funny. You got to kind of sit them down first, explain it, help them learn how to feel it. If you're not the right person, maybe you can get a therapist or a coach to help them with it, but then help them to learn. We all think that we've either got to be totally on with our emotions or totally off, that
yes,
black and white.
yes,
No, it's that's like either peeing all the time or never peeing. That's silly. The body will tell you when it's time. Know how to remove yourself, release, clean yourself up, get back to life. So it's not a big deal.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
But
You
you
know
got
what?
to learn first and get comfortable first with how you do it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And
Yeah.
when you said that when you do your review at night, the
Right.
VHS tape, when you were saying that you get to that point, you stop, and then you said release. I think that was the word you used.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
you breathe, release, right? Do you feel the actual feeling like, do you allow the, well, I'm thinking you would allow the tears, or let's say it's anger. Do you allow the expression in that moment, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, it depends on the emotion.
Yeah.
But everybody's different, and I've helped thousands of people now learn how to develop their own style of release. But many times, if you just give the body permission to do it, it
Yes.
doesn't get so volcanic or so visceral.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe some quiet crying, maybe some under the breath cussing. Maybe, usually not. Usually you can, I've probably taught a good 5 to 8,000 people how to do this now. And I find three basic responses as they're breathing it out and giving themselves permission to let it go. It feels like it's either flowing out of them like a water baby would, or it's evaporating, or it's just kind of burning up. Those are the three that people say. It's just feels like it's just kind of burning up like an old film, or it's evaporating, or it's flowing out of you. Those are the three most basic responses,
Yeah.
with flowing being probably 40 to 50%.
I think that you providing for them the platform, the explanation, like this is what's going to happen. When you come in like that and you're not afraid of them, you
Right,
flow.
right.
Really cool. I want to tell you that I am certain that you're very special, and you're going to make an incredible impact on this world. I know
Well,
that.
thank you.
I'm certain
What
of
a, that's You made my day. That's the
it.
best
No, I'm
compliment I've gotten
positive.
in a long time.
No, I know it. Yeah, you need to be like out there everywhere, but you are. Yeah. So I just want to thank you so much. I really feel honored that you came on this show, and that you shared your heart, and your incredible, miraculous story. So
Oh, well, thanks,
thank you
Alison.
so
You've
much.
made it, I've been on hundreds of these, and you made it enjoyable, fun, and very authentic. And so thank you for giving me the chance to be on your show. I really appreciate it. And for all that you're doing in the world as well.
Oh, thank you. And oh my goodness, we didn't say your book.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yes, tell
It's
them where
out
to find you.
exclusively on Amazon right now. It's called The Wild Cure: From Death to Life on Oregon's Longest River. And we specifically designed it so that it's pretty much just my story. It only takes, most people are finishing it in a reading, a sitting or two. And we did, for those of you that are big Daisy Jones and the Six fans, um, we did it in that same style called braided interview, where we took everybody on the team, we interviewed them, and then the narrative is just like one big conversation about what happened.
Oh
And
wow.
so it makes it really fun. It's just not me going on and on about myself, which wouldn't be my style anyway.
Yeah, but
So
your next
yeah, you
book
got
will
to
be
hear
about,
everybody's experience.
wow, that's awesome.
It's
So
fun.
and where else can they find you?
I am the most active on Instagram right now. And if you DM me or make a comment, you're going to hear back from me. And that's at Dean Hall Official. And then I just have the bare bones of my website up, still under construction. It's called thewildcureway.com.
I looked at it. It's beautiful. It's
Oh,
really
good.
good. And so please, guys, no, anything you can find with this man will be life changing, really. I just want to thank you so much again. And it's a wrap.
Okay.